Welcome to the next installment of the CBTG Get to Know You webinar series. I'm Craig Hendrickson, CEO and co-founder at CBTG, and today I have with me
Bob Cook,
Yeah.
the other founder of CBTG.
and Chief Information Officer.
And Chief Information.
Yeah, the guy behind the curtain. You know, I've asked you to join me for this particular piece of content because the focus in this conversation is compliance in 2025, cybersecurity, and all the things that come with it. And we know it's been a doozy of a year. You and I have been working together for 2 decades at various companies, here for 16 plus at this point, and we've seen a lot of things change in that time. From my point of view, compliance, or let's just say cybersecurity, was always something we had to talk about, and there was a set of best practices, and it was grounded in a few, key components of architecture and a few protocols. But really, in the last 5 or 6 years, things have ramped up due to ransomware, due to cyber security attacks, due to insurance companies that you deal with quite often now, right? So it's become a big component of what we do. And because of our client set and a lot of what we do in the aerospace and manufacturing industry, there's a ton of it. This year, CMMC, do you remember the exact date?
So it was November 15th. It is now 2026, November 15th as the final.
And before that, it was October, and before that, they moved the goalpost 2 or 3 times too. So I laughingly ask you because the date's been different every time.
Well, this one is actually certified, so this
Good.
is the date.
Right. So what that means, maybe I'll ask you. Tell us what that means tell us what CMMC is for those who don't understand, first of all.
So CMMC is the enhancement to NIST. NIST is the government standard for security for all companies, right? That's the minimum requirements of security and policies you should have in place. And the insurance companies expect to see that when you do your cybersecurity renewal. If you don't have that in place and you have a claim, they will just deny you.
Right.
So it used to be best practice. Now it's a requirement when you sign your cybersecurity addendum to your insurance policy. And then CMMC is the manufacturing version of it, which adds a few stricter controls on top of the original 110, which is what NIST is. If you're a manufacturer that deals with the government or any foreign governments or any in the high financial sector, you'll have to be under a CMMC standard. So financial means financial related to some type of government, like contracting, right? So if you're providing a source or a product or service to another government contractor, and it's a financial-based service, you still have to be CMMC certified.
Well, this has been a big push this year, obviously, and like I said earlier, comes because of all the recent ransomware attacks and how big they've become. We're dealing with it 2 to 3 times a year ourselves, and we have all the correct locks on the door and the right, security stack in place. But a lot of these things originate with somebody clicking the wrong link in an email, right? It doesn't matter.
A cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
you start, it's like a radar detector, right? The radar detector companies and the radar detector gun makers are all the same. So one makes something and then the other finds a way to defeat it and then they have to go back. So IT is pretty much turned into that same principle. Is you have a security breach and then you have a vendor who fixes that breach and then they find another way around it.
And many years ago, we just followed best practices and industry standards and tried to be at the forefront of that with the package we put together. But what I've seen over the last few years, and maybe even around COVID time, I remember things getting pretty serious. I think the people working from home and teleworking, remote work, remote access into the networks, it opened a lot of holes that there didn't used to be. And at the same time, these hacks and the ransomware were getting more technical and they were getting better at it. and they were
It's $1 billion business.
they were demanding more money, and they were getting it, right? So there was this like perfect storm. We've been doing this long enough together. I've been known to make the joke the first 15 years of my career with you, we were solving problems through technology, and we were finding new exciting things we could do with tech and introducing solutions to people that made their lives easier. And for the last 5 years, you've just been taking things away from people. you can't access this anymore, or this doesn't work anymore. This isn't safe. You can do this, but you have to have multi-factor authentication or multiple logins. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. It's the way the world is now.
I think AI is going to make it even worse.
Yeah.
Because AI has the ability to do the breaking in of security on its own.
It doesn't sleep.
So yeah, you don't have to have a team of 5, 10, 15 people sitting in a room banging against machines anymore, trying to figure out a way to do it. An AI engine will do it all for you and find any exposures or anything it can actually get through. And it does it a lot faster than a group of people in a data center somewhere that nobody knows where it is. So
the world that's coming, yeah, and already here in a lot of ways. So because of that trajectory, the government's gotten more involved, and CMMC, again, they did move the goalposts, we jokingly say a few times, because it's expensive. There's a lot of new hoops to jump through. There's a lot of new layers of security and products that need to be put in place to become compliant. And there's a lot of things that people used to do on the network that don't work anymore because they're exposures. So let's talk about that for a minute, because this has been a big piece of your daily job for the last year, as I've witnessed. A lot of our clients, a year ago started having these questions, and we tried to, make everybody feel comfortable that they're with the right company, because we have our finger on the pulse of this. I've watched you read the annual book, every year for as many years as I can remember, and you always say, like, who reads all this? Who understands all this? Well, that's you at CBTG, and then you train your team below you. But a lot of them come to us this year, and it's obviously a little more of a pressing matter because CMMC is, it's more difficult. It's more technical than a lot of what we've done in the past. So let's talk about scoring people and audits and what your process has been through that.
Well, we would go in and do an assessment. Basically, you start with NIST. The whole world, everything in security starts at NIST, government recommendations. So there's 110 questions that you have to answer and have to be compliant with. That's your base score. 110 is where you want to be. That's fully compliant.
How many people are there?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
So obviously, CMMC was a recommendation for the longest time. The government's had the standard out for a while. Over the last couple of years, obviously, a lot of things have happened at government contractors, supply chain hacks, things like that. So they have to tighten up. So they're tightening up, said we're going to spend 2 years figuring out a new CMMC standard, and then we're going to push it down, and everybody's got to be compliant. And when they redid CMMC, they took NIST and they added more scores to each of the questions. They weighted them, so some are acceptable to be lax on and some are not. They also took away the self-certification. CMMC used to be, we would go in, we would do the NIST assessment, we would do the CMMC scoring, and then we would come up with a thing and say, okay, you're certified for the year. And that was acceptable. Now it's not. Has to be a third party. The published CMMC guidelines for financial for business is to expect around $300,000 for a large business and about $80,000 for a small business to become compliant.
That's a scary budget.
It's a very scary budget, which is why they pushed the date 3 times.
And it's been difficult, in the MSP world, because a lot of times we're the messenger of that not so great news. We've had a lot of meetings with clients over the years of how to get them there and how to do it in a logical progression, because a lot of it is you need better hardware, you need things that are within contract from the particular manufacturer, have support on them, aren't past a certain age, and other protocols. They have physical security is becoming a piece of it. So again, like, if you hadn't done a lot in the past, or hadn't done enough in the past, and then all of a sudden you have to swallow this big pill. It's a whole lot. So what we've worked to do is try to be ahead of it as far ahead of it as possible. Sometimes that first score scares clients, and they're surprised that they come to us and say, "Hey, we don't know where we are. We found your name on a site as a company that does well with this," and we'll score them, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's pretty low." And then our job is to say, "Okay, well here's the easy ones to fix," and that'll bring your score up a lot, right? Because you just weren't doing something right. That's an easy tweak. And here's the things that are harder are going to cost you more. And let's budget for that 6 months from now, because you're still going to be ahead of the date. That's if they don't move it again. Earlier in the year we had those discussions. So we've done our best to mitigate that. There's also for different. In manufacturing specifically, there's also different grants from the state that we've been able to point people out that helps to keep some of those costs down, or reclaim some of those costs anyway for new hardware.
Well, we have a medium and small business group of customers here, right? So we've created sets that can be financially feasible to get a smaller business certified, right? Because if you have, let's say you have a small manufacturing company in Connecticut, 10, 15 people, you're not going to have 80 grand to drop right off the top.
Absolutely not.
And you're certainly not going to want to be in a contract with these top of the line made for enterprise products, right? Which is what they're going to recommend. But we put together packages for people based on the ability to get them certified with the least amount of disruption and a reasonable cost. Right? Cost is not the factor, because if cost is the factor, you're not going to get decent security.
True.
But you have to work out the balance between what a small manufacturing company would be able to afford and what products will meet their requirements, versus just saying, hey, everybody's got to use these enterprise products that a Pratt & Whitney uses.
Yeah.
And that's just not feasible for some customers. But we are able to work that out so that the customers end up in a situation where they meet all the requirements necessary, and they don't have to take a huge burden of, how am I going to pay for this thing?
And what that's looked like on our side for some of the product sets would be that we actually have had to break it off into like a two-pronged attack, right? So for a small and mid-sized business, maybe privately owned, that wants to have managed SOC, we have a product that is checks the boxes and is cost effective for them. And then for a higher level, aerospace firm, of which we have a few with hundreds of employees that are dealing direct with the government, well, they need a higher level managed SOC, and guess what? That costs 5 times as much, but we have that on the menu as well. So it's been important. The supply
chain is broken into 3 tiers. There's a tier 1 supplier, which talks directly or works directly with the DoD or the Department of Energy. And then there's a tier 2 supplier, which is probably a company that would fall in our wheelhouse, right? They produce products, they give them or sell them to a company like Pratt & Whitney or Rolls-Royce or Lockheed Martin. And those are the tier 1s, so they have a stricter set of requirements. But as it goes down the supply chain, these people have requirements they have to insist that people below them follow. So our customers fall in the tier 2 section of that. So CMMC 2 is where most of our customers in the manufacturing space have to be. And those are required audits. So it's not like you can say, okay, well, I'll just self-certify me this year.
Right. You'll end up losing contracts next year is how this is going to go.
They are prevented from actually giving contracts to people who have low SPAR score. So a SPAR score is your NIST controls, the 110. They have to be reported to the government in a portal. And it's abbreviated SPARs. I don't know exactly what there's so many acronyms. I don't know what the term specifically means. But yeah, you have to report those every year to the government, and those are what they base your contracts on. And if you're in a competitive situation for a government contract or as a supplier to a tier 1 provider, then they will look at that SPAR score as one of the deciding factors. So somebody with a 109 will beat out somebody with a 106 score for a contract. And these didn't used to be as heavily weighted as they are now, but because of all the supply chain attacks, this is a major factor in winning bids. So the closer to 110 or at 110, if you have to be CMMC certified at level 2 or greater, 110 is your score. You got to have it or you're going to start losing business.
Now let's talk for a minute or two about how we stay smart and keep our finger to the pulse. You know, I know, like I said,
We
I've
do
seen
a
you.
lot of that.
I've seen what you do, but for our listeners at home, maybe talk a little bit about what your annual and maybe even quarterly current events focus looks like.
So we have multi places we have to keep up with. We do the standards, we follow all the CISA requirements, which are the government alerts that come out whenever an exposure is found. CISA puts out a bulletin, they email it to all of us who have subscribed to it, and we act on that bulletin as appropriate. We also have to keep up with all the manufacturers, because if equipment or software becomes exposed, we've got to be able to close that hole as quick as possible. So there's always software updates to be aware of for customers, especially in an ERP system where you're protecting financial information. You got to be really strong about security with that. We work closely with Homeland Security, the FBI, Secret Service, depending on which contracts our customer has, because each division within the government is responsible for a different group. And then it's just a lot of training. There's always CMMC training, there's always NIST training going on, and it's just constant, because if you don't keep up with it and they make a change, you end up behind the 8 ball trying to play catch up.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time in webinars, working with the auditing partners, because the auditors are the end result of this, right? If they don't say, yes, you have a 110 score, then nothing matters what you did.
Right.
So the goal is to be working with the auditors and to make sure we understand what the auditors are looking for. A lot of people end up in these assessments and they guessed at what some of those things were, or they looked at it from an only IT point of view. And a lot of these things for CMMC are not just IT-based. They're procedure-based, they're marking-based, they're facility-based. You have to have that overall view of how the business works, what the business requirements are, and how to keep that business constantly up to date and compliant so that they're not exposed.
Yeah, it's not something we can look at once a year, right?
No.
It's a constant.
I wish it was.
Right.
Make my job easier.
It's become a large part of what you do. Like, you know, I've said a few times, we've worked together for a lot of years, and I've seen different versions of your day-to-day workload, and I would say that this one doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. I'm confident I've picked the right partner, and CBTG has the right man at the helm for this, but, you know.
Well, we've got a good team underneath. Everybody, you know, stays up to date. We constantly meet on this stuff. We have weekly meetings to discuss updates. Obviously, the team has to be involved. We don't have 2 customers. We have a lot of customers. So when a change happens, you know, it can't just be one person. Your team has to understand how all this stuff works and what the requirements are, because an exposure comes out and you may have to jump at 60, 70 customers within a 12-hour period to get these things fixed, and you know, not one guy's going to be doing that. Right. So we have to have a team. Some companies have one person that heads their security, some MSPs, and you know, that person gets overloaded, especially in a situation like this.
A crisis, yeah.
So we extend that to our team as well. So the team understands how all this works. So you're not relying on somebody to say, well, I'm just an IT engineer, let me go back to the security guy later and get you an answer. You know, our team will give you that answer. We've got a long road ahead of us and a short amount of time to get all of that long road done. Yeah. Obviously, our customers are ahead of the game. Since 2016, we've been doing NIST assessments for our customers, so they've already been moved, you know, a good chunk of steps towards it. And the ones we've had compliant, have compliance issues, requirements, we've always been on top of those as well, doing the yearly audits with either the government or whoever. And we have independent auditors that also look at these to make sure our controls are all in place.
And we've had to periodically change our cyber stack offerings as products that we've aligned with in the past fall in or out of compliance, or so that's something we have to look at as well. Thankfully, you have help there too from the team, but that's something that's an ongoing response for us.
Yeah. And another critical piece is the MSP itself. We do a lot of training, and in that training, they insist that you are to the highest level of your highest customer. So a lot of MSPs don't actually extend those security models to themselves.
Right.
And that's a problem, because when the audits happen on these manufacturing companies, Department of Energy companies, then you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, you're in a bad spot. Yeah.
So you don't want that to happen.
That's been an increasing budget for us internally, and I think we share the same sentiment as a lot of these clients. They're just like, wow, where's this budget going to come from? You're pushing these changes down on us, but really, again, it's the don't shoot the messenger situation, and it's about doing things in a logical order. It's about not stacking all your new budget into 1 month. Let's take small bites and work our way through this. Now, again, there is a deadline that's closer than ever, but that's not the end either, because 2027 will happen, and 2028, and so on and so forth, and it's going to be constant.
Well, and we also have to understand that compliance and certification is not just for the construction industry, right? We have a variety of customers in a variety of different fields. So in our insurance fields, we have to be up to standards on Sarbanes-Oxley, and we've got to be able to pass an audit for Sarbanes-Oxley. For our medical customers and doctors' offices, dentists' offices, et cetera, those people have to be HIPAA compliant, and it's not a small thing, because they'll lose their insurance altogether if they're found to have that. So we not only have to keep up with CMMC and NIST as the base, but our engineers are also trained in Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, any of the requirements that are there, and we do have customers out of the country, so GDPR is also important for us to maintain compliance with, or they won't be able to do business over in the UK or any of Europe.
Again, that's all great information, and it's a lot to swallow. If anyone that's out there is watching this video and looking for a company that understands these things better than maybe who they're with now, I'm hoping that this conversation paves that road to a bigger conversation.
We're a security-focused company. That's where we've had to become, and that's what we are.
Oh, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
I'd like to go back to building networks again, but I think that security has become our #1 function as IT providers these days, and everything else has become ancillary, it seems.
Well, on that note, I thank you for all you do and keeping us current, because without you, we'd have fallen long behind in Connecticut. So I appreciate you.
All right.
And thank you for joining me today.